Shadow started jumping from building to building as he leaped with the help of his new ride, moving through the desolated ruins of the place. But suddenly, he noticed something. He saw some people ganging up on his sister. Wondering what was going on, he looked closer and saw that his sister was getting badly beaten by some female thugs who were planning and scheming to seduce the president. They were angry because the sister started talking about joining their guild. We come to know that the dumb sister was trying to seduce the president of a really popular guild, and she was caught by some girls who were also eyeing the same president. So now they were bullying her and beating her to death, warning her to keep her distance from the president or else they would tear her ego apart. Even after the warning was given, they continued beating the girl while Shadow watched from a distance, not even caring about the dumb girl. Shadow immediately realized that maybe his sister had joined the Knight's sanctuary and had gotten caught up in a palace intrigue and war after her scheming. There had been plenty of these tedious power struggles in Shadow's past life too, but he had always handled them for the girl. This time, it was different. He knew how scheming his dumb sister was, so whatever he had experienced in his previous life, now the girl would have to savor it to the fullest so she could know how it feels. Meanwhile, we see that the girl was crying, begging everyone to stop because it hurt so much she thought she was going to die. But they weren't listening to Yao at all and were getting ready to smash her to a pulp. They even declared her characterless because she was trying to go after boys she shouldn't target. Still, Shadow did not care and left her, going inside a statue because he knew that inside the massive statue in the ruins of the city lay a hidden chamber that could take him back to the original little town, so he could be safe again. Most people were completely unaware of this place because it was hidden. However, going through the portal wasn't free. The first time it cost around 500 days, the second time 1,000 days, and the third time it doubled with a 2,000-day penalty. Shadow knew that every time he teleported back, the lifespan required would be doubled. As time flowed, the initial small town would gradually evolve into more advanced areas, and hidden gems and bosses would appear, dropping significant rewards. This time, it was the ancient god's stone tablet, an absolute treasure they couldn't afford to miss. As Shadow got through the teleportation stone, the system asked him if he wished to be transported back to the forsaken land of divine Dark Moon Town. Shadow was intrigued, wondering why he was hearing about Dark Moon Town, which should only be unlocked much later in the game. Even in his past life, he had never heard of it. So Shadow decided to teleport and check it out. As the teleportation completed, Shadow found himself in a completely new town with lots of elderly people chatting like nothing was happening. Shadow couldn't believe how lively it was, but wondered why most people in the town were elderly. Meanwhile, two adventurers returned to the safe town with an old lady. They were relieved to be back in the safe zone. As agreed, they had leveled the old lady up to level 3, and during the upgrade, she had gained 72 days of life. All she needed to do was hand over those trades to the adventurers who helped her. But the old woman started abusing the adventurers, refusing to give them money or life, because she thought they were doing charity while being part of an organization that upgraded people. The adventurers still tried to handle it calmly, smiling and telling the grandma that they weren't asking for money. Since they had teamed up to defeat the monsters, life points had dropped, and a portion was meant to sustain the group. She would also get a portion of it once it was collected. She just needed to hand over the tradable lifespan to them. But the old woman was so dense she started screaming, telling the boys she didn't understand what they were talking about. She couldn't believe the young adventurers were asking an old lady for money, calling them shameless and insulting them. The adventurers still tried to reason with her, explaining that by helping her level up, they were just asking for a portion of her tradable lifespan. If she hadn't wanted to level up, she should have said so. If they hadn't helped, there was no way she would have survived or gotten any experience. But now, the old lady was playing the victim card, screaming not to be touched, when no one was touching her, and claiming the charity group was being inappropriate. Just then, Shadow grabbed the old lady and threw her away. No one saw what was happening, and before she could react, Shadow was ready to slay her. In an instant, she was completely drained of life. After the old lady was finished, the adventurers realized she had been scamming them and thanked Shadow, even though they didn't know who he was. Shadow told them to go ahead and take the lifespan for themselves. It was just a little something they could handle. As Shadow left, the adventurers checked the life and realized the lady already had 72 days of tradable lifespan, even though she shouldn't have had that much. They confirmed she was a complete scammer. While walking away, Shadow remembered the Dream Sand River Guild, who operated from Dark Moon Town. The guild was dedicated to charitable activities, selflessly guiding the elderly to survive in the Forsaken Lands. With official recognition and strong support, they had become the largest guild in the whole city. Shadow knew that in the chaotic apocalypse, they would need more people like them who genuinely wanted to help. Meanwhile, the scene shifts. Yao's friend was fighting with her mother, who was giving her a buff. The lady was using multiple lightning strikes to defeat a monster, and the girl's father was also helping, eventually defeating the monster. The girl knew both her parents were amazing, and the mother knew that as long as the family gave full effort and followed their teachings, they could surpass any monster. The girl's father asked if her friend Yao was also joining the Knight's Sanctuary Guild, since the membership fees were sky-high. The girl told her father that even though she wanted Yao to join their charity guild, she wasn't ready. Even after being told it was a community guild where people who weren't gaming pros could help each other, she still wasn't willing. But Yao had already reached level 10, thanks to help from the Knight's Sanctuary Guild. The mother knew that joining that guild wasn't easy. They always required a 3-year contract and drained the players dry. She believed that if the sister didn't have real skills, it was best for her to stay quiet and just become a small fighter, defeating little monsters and retreating when necessary. Her friend already knew that Yao was so dumb she thought she was extraordinary just because she had a hidden profession, and believed she was better than everyone. Just then, multiple arrows interrupted the girl's thoughts. She screamed, unable to comprehend what was happening. A group of thugs revealed themselves, happy they had taken out a man with just a few arrows. Others didn't even praise the shooter, saying the man was just a worker from the community guild and was trash anyway, dead weight that wouldn't give much experience. The leader stepped forward, threatening the 2 women and asking them to calmly give up their lifespans if they wanted to live. The girl resisted, reminding him that murder in the wild was explicitly banned by the authorities, and asked if he wasn't afraid of consequences. But the leader didn't care. He told them to stop talking and give up their lifespans within 3 seconds. The mother, being the smarter one, got ready to give up the lifespan, but the girl foolishly stopped her, thinking she could hold the thugs off while her mother called for backup. Just then, the leader attacked both of them, intending to keep them for fun since they looked young. But before he could do anything, spells repelled them. The attack hadn't come from the girl, it came from Shadow. He took the leader's head in an instant, while his ride grabbed the others by the neck. Everything was over in just a few seconds. The leader and his group finally arrived at the safe town and were instantly teleported inside. But confusion and dread quickly settled over them as they realized they had lost a significant amount of their lifespan. The leader in particular was left with nothing, no lifespan to trade or recover, and he couldn't understand how it had all vanished. He speculated that perhaps their failure to follow the game's hidden rules had triggered a penalty. But even so, he couldn't believe that such a brutal consequence could be enforced simply because he was the killer. The thought gnawed at him. If this trend continued, he would die in real life. Desperation took over as he recognized that the only way to regain any ground was to slay monsters, collect lifespan, and try to survive. Just as that thought took root, he was ambushed once again. A sword forged from pure light tore through the air toward the group, catching them completely off guard. They hadn't anticipated a second attack, nor did they understand who set the rules they were being punished by. The leader had assumed that bending the system wouldn't have consequences, but now he stood stunned, barely comprehending the threat. When the boy demanded to know who they were, the attackers revealed themselves as official hunters. They insisted that the leader provide real-world identification so that legal action could be taken outside the game's confines. One officer warned that resistance from him or his crew would result in immediate termination, and worse, repeated killings before they could even log out. Elsewhere, Shadow was draining all the experience points and lifespan from the boy using his cursed technique. The girl beside him thanked him sincerely, saying that if not for his help, both she and her mother would have been doomed. Shadow, still cloaked in his usual mystery, was caught off guard by her gratitude. Her name, as it turned out, was Chyan. Not even Zhao or the boy had expected that these two would ever become friends, and yet now, as they prepared to part ways, something about the connection still felt remarkable. But before Chyan could say anything else, Shadow vanished without a trace, leaving her puzzled and alone. Clutching the lifespan that her father had lost, she resolved to return it to him, while her mother quietly questioned where Shadow had disappeared to and what could have driven him to leave so suddenly without seeking a reward or recognition. Neither of them could comprehend that they had just met Shadow, the #1 ranked player in the game, second only to the gods. Unlike anyone else, he stood apart from the rest in both skill and demeanor. The scene shifted to a desolate jungle where several adventurers waited in silence. Captain Anya had assured them that Shadow would meet them there, but half an hour had already passed and doubts were beginning to rise. They whispered amongst themselves, questioning whether Shadow could truly defeat the bosses within. The rumor was that these bosses could respawn endlessly, and even Shadow might be no match for a hive-mind creature resurrecting infinitely. Still, what they didn't know was that Shadow was already there, invisible, listening to every word. Without making a sound, he moved toward the boss, his thoughts focused on the ancient god's stone tablet that lay hidden nearby. He knew that once activated, the tablet would bestow a powerful bonus affix on his gear, along with a dangerous negative effect. In Shadow's possession, this tablet wouldn't just tweak his stats, it could transform his class completely. He recalled witnessing the world's 7th-ranked master summon ethereal forms of ancient gods using 7 tablets during battle, obliterating legendary bosses with ease. But this tablet was different. It was the foundation of the hive mind boss's power. Unlike others, this tablet came with a unique and unpredictable mechanic. Some bosses it spawned were invisible, their stealth capabilities so high that players died without ever seeing their killer. Others were led by illusion-casting wizards who slew players before the boss even entered the field. And now, the current boss had the ability to resurrect endlessly. Shadow understood that each time the boss died, it returned stronger, stacking a frenzy attribute. The official strategy was to kill them one at a time, so Shadow wondered what would happen if he defied the rule and destroyed them all at once. Deciding it was worth the risk, he summoned his undead army and set them loose. The undead swarmed the bosses with relentless force, taking damage but dealing plenty in return. Shadow assessed the monster's strength, twice as powerful as a typical golden tier boss even at level 10, and with no reflection damage. Channeling his Dark Knight aura, he cloaked himself and began executing each boss while they were distracted by the undead. When the last of the monsters fell, the real chaos began. Their corpses began merging together, fusing in unnatural ways. Shadow watched closely, realizing that his gamble had paid off. This was the true phase 2, and now he saw it clearly. The massive boss monster's body was inscribed with multiple ancient symbols. They were divine glyphs, one's Shadow instantly recognized from his past life. The creature was Athos, the ancient god of calamity. Each glyph held a word, and together they formed an ancient sentence that revealed the sequence in which the boss's body needed to be attacked. Grinning to himself, Shadow remembered how he had once studied the divine ruins to no avail in his previous life. Now, finally, that useless knowledge was about to prove vital. He moved with precision, striking each symbol in the correct order until the monster began to sink beneath the ground. Yet even then, the nightmare wasn't over. A monstrous form emerged from the river, refusing to submit. Dozens of stone tablets and sealed coffins rose from the depths around it. Shadow understood immediately. The inscriptions matched those from the monster's body. It meant that the demon could only be permanently slain if defeated near its corresponding coffin. With the ancient god's stone tablet now in hand and clarity at last, Shadow moved in for the final blow. The time for hesitation was over. He would end this fight and the demon for good. Crows flew over the battlefield where Shadow was engaged in combat with the ancient god known as Slate. The nearby players turned their attention toward the disturbance, uncertain whether the shaking they felt was from an earthquake or if the boss was going into a frenzy. Their curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to investigate. The team's mage asked where Shadow could be, doubtful he'd show up at all. Her teammate agreed, thinking there was no chance Shadow could beat the boss on his own. Just then, the swordsman in the group noticed something unusual and called the others over. The entire area was empty, no sign of either Shadow or the boss. The scene left them speechless. As they explored the area, they noticed the ground had started to crack. The players began to speculate, had some natural event eliminated the boss, or was something else going on? Captain Anu sent them a message instructing them to retreat. Shadow had already handled the boss. The players were stunned and confused. They couldn't believe it. Shadow had taken down the powerful enemy by himself. The once-occupied coffins were now empty, and the chains that held the bosses were broken. Just minutes ago, they'd been skeptical of Shadow's chances, yet now all 7 bosses were gone without them even seeing him arrive. They started to understand why their leader had so much faith in Shadow. Meanwhile, under the moon's glow, Shadow walked alone, holding an ancient slate in one hand. He felt that this dungeon run had gone better than expected. A quiet smile crossed his face. He had reached level 14. Defeating the 7 bosses and using Greedy Hand had earned him 294 evolution points. But what mattered most was the ancient slate he now possessed. Because of its complex design, the game's administrators wouldn't be able to decode it for at least a month, which would cause serious losses on their end. Shadow spent 210 of his evolution points, keeping 115 in reserve. One of his skills, Shadow Flash Slash, was upgraded from Epic to Legendary. The upgrades were impressive. The teleport distance increased to 40 meters, stealth lasted 15 seconds, and the cooldown was reduced to 8.8 seconds. Now the skill delivered 9 slashes in a wider 6-meter radius, each dealing an additional 700 attack damage. Most notable, though, was a new passive. Every hit granted a shield equal to 100% of his max HP, stacking up to 9 times and lasting for a full minute. Feeling more confident than ever, Shadow realized that if all 9 slashes hit, his effective HP would be 10 times higher than normal. That drastically reduced his risk of dying in battle. He activated stealth and moved silently through the area. At his current pace, he estimated he'd reach level 15 in 5 hours, after which he'd head for Magic City. Later that night, Shadow reached a set of ruins where a group of women were still beating up the sister. They hadn't let up and looked ready to keep going. Shadow raised an eyebrow, surprised they were still at it. The white-haired woman stretched her arms and complained that her back and waist were sore. Another woman was angry because her hand had become swollen from punching too much, saying it felt like her hands were burning. After a final insult, they spat on the sister and decided to call it a day. According to them, the beating was a lesson she wouldn't forget. Bruised and battered, the sister slowly sat up and began to cry. She blamed everything on King Fang. She said she'd told him to end things, but hadn't meant it literally. Apparently, he didn't understand the way women sometimes say the opposite of what they mean. Using her staff, she stood up. Luckily, she had a contract with the Knight's Sanctuary. This meant that for the next 3 years, her survival was secured, even though she had traded away 50% of her lifespan. Still, this deal would help her grow stronger than Chu Yan and the others. She cast Holy Healing, a skill that fully restored health. She promised herself that one day she'd repay everyone who looked down on her, Shadow and those women included. But to her surprise, the healing spell was absorbed by someone else. Shadow, still invisible, had accidentally received the healing. The sister, confused and kneeling on the ground, thought the spell had failed. She had no idea where the magic had gone. At the same time, in the ruins of Magic City, another group of players was fighting a stone-type boss. The creature launched a heavy attack, but the tank blocked it with his shield. Not far away, 3 figures observed the battle from cover. One of them was Qiang Shiishi. She scoffed at Daxia's players, mocking how 18 of them were needed just to take down a single boss. Her teammate asked her to be more appreciative since those players were technically helping them. She laughed and called him polite, but added that Daxia's people dealt such low damage, it was taking forever to finish off a simple gold-tier enemy. The players continued fighting, and the boss's health dropped to nearly half. The team's mage encouraged everyone to push for the kill. Just then, a spear pierced his chest, killing him on the spot. His body dissolved into a lifespan orb. The attacker was one of Shiishi's subordinates. With a grin, he thanked the mage for his effort and called the dead party a fine offering. Panic spread among the players. They had realized they were being attacked by the Spade Gang. This gang was made up of ruthless women from both Daxia and foreign nations. Many couldn't understand how these traitors could help outsiders slaughter their own people. Their leader urged them to stay calm and fight together. But Kai Wungzai wasn't impressed. She promised that none of the Daxia pigs would survive. Her subordinate used thunderous tremor, a skill that shook the ground and trapped the players. She rushed in with her daggers and slaughtered them with ease, mocking them as she went. She muttered that Daxia's fighters were nothing but garbage. Her eyes glowed with cruel intent. She knew the authorities had already flagged them. But in her mind, Daxia was already rotting and full of trash. Her companion mentioned that as elite players backed by investors, regular players had no chance against them. As the dead players' bodies turned into lifespan orbs, she noted that although their real identities remained hidden for now, it would be safer to leave Daxia. North America would be their next destination. She stared at the ground and said they should create a guild focused on hunting Daxia players. One of the men liked the idea. Another asked what they would name it. She held up her dagger and declared that the guild would be called Alice. Then she collapsed onto the grass, daydreaming about being surrounded by her dark-skinned teammates. With a satisfied grin, she decided the day's work was done. It was time to log out and throw a party to celebrate the birth of Guild Alice. Captain Eniu smiled and waved toward Shadow, mentioning they arrived and suggesting they discuss the price of the hideout. When Shadow asked about the price, she replied with 1,500, but he immediately commented that the amount was too low. She admitted she knew it wasn't enough, so she pushed back and managed to convince her superior to raise the offer to 2,000. Shadow agreed to the deal, choosing to hand it over at the statue located at the center of the ruins. He understood that Eniu was sharp. Despite that, she still tried to offer a lower price first. Later, Shadow arrived at the statue where Eniu was already waiting, surrounded by several knights. With a faint blush, she explained that she was carrying a significant amount of lifespan, so the High Command had assigned her an escort for safety. Shadow's expression turned serious. He knew this wasn't much yet. Those people were still unaware of his real strength, and the knights only knew a fraction of his true capabilities. Shadow handed her the key, and the system notified him that the transaction was complete. He had given up ownership of the church sanctuary hideout key, and in return received 2,000 years of tradable lifespan. After finalizing the exchange, Shadow turned to leave. Eniu bid him farewell while the knights nearby looked puzzled. They didn't understand why she would pay so much for a single hideout. She clarified that they didn't grasp its value. The location could accommodate hundreds or even thousands of people, and only someone like Shadow would willingly let it go. Thanks to the 2,000 years he earned, Shadow could now fully gear up before heading to Magic City. He quickly spent the lifespan he gained. First, he used 71.2 years to reach level 15. Then he acquired several skills. A mythic tier 1 named Blessed Liberation for 161.7 years, a legendary tier skill called Assassin's Instinct for 71.12 years, and 3 epic tier skills, Shadow Ring Blade for 36.35 years, Silent Concealment for 23.71 years, and Darkest Hour for 34.65 years. Lastly, he bought an item named Mount Bell for 113.89 years. Aside from equipment, all of his levels and skills were now fully aligned, meaning his strength in the real world nearly matched what he had in-game. The system then alerted him that his hunger level had reached 90%. Having gone without food for too long, he decided to disconnect and eat something. After logging out, Shadow woke up in a cage at the hotel. Some men nearby noticed he was awake and drew their weapons, demanding he hand over his lifespan or suffer the same fate as others in the motel. One of them laughed, saying that the apocalypse had been great for him because it meant he could kill anyone he wanted. Shadow stared at them intently, and one of the men yelled at him again to hurry up. Another asked his boss if he could tear Shadow apart. The one holding the bat thought Shadow was too scared to move, and suggested they just kill him already. Before they could act, a strange force began to fill the air. Shadow activated Shadow Ring Blade, and soon the entire hotel began collapsing. He grabbed a pack of instant noodles, realizing that his increased power came with a greater energy cost. Regular food was no longer enough to sustain him. While eating, Shadow reminded himself that after settling things with Qiang Shishi and her guild Alice, his next target would be the divine gifted book. Riding on his wolf, he set out. He knew she was clever and far harder to track than Song Fi, but he planned to use the killing Fang mission he had accepted earlier as bait to draw her in. Hungry but focused, he made his way toward Magic City, hopping to find something to eat on the way. Meanwhile, in Magic City, King Zai was throwing a party. She praised her men, hugging two of them and mentioning how amazing it felt to wake up and enter the game again after such an intense experience. They complimented her as well, calling her skills unbeatable. Amid the laughter, they jokingly referred to her as a crazy hot chick. Then, one of her subordinates walked in and informed her that Shadow had sent a message. Qinfang was dead. He wanted to meet in Magic City in real life, to hand over Qinfang's head and collect the final payment. She considered the request too risky. Instead, she asked him to send a photo. However, her subordinate explained that Shadow didn't use a phone due to concerns about being tracked by the authorities. Hearing this, she smiled. She was pleased to learn that Shadow, too, was cautious around the government. Since the authorities were stepping up their pressure, she decided to use this moment to lure him in. If they could bring Shadow into Guild Alice, the Daxia officials would lose one of their most powerful threats. To test him, she came up with a plan. She sent Shadow coordinates to meet in-game first, choosing the Spectre Academy ruins. Calling out for Skywalker, she used affectionate words, saying she missed him and needed help handling a certain someone. At that time, Shadow was meditating. He had activated silent concealment, which allowed him to stay completely hidden as long as he remained still. He realized she wanted to meet him in the game. The coordinates were close, so he logged in, ready to see what she had planned. A few hours later, Shadow arrived at Spectre Academy while still invisible. Just then, government agents appeared and confronted King Shishi. They identified her as Spade A, the leader of the infamous Spade Gang, and ordered her to surrender or face military action. She smiled and addressed Tian Xingjian, telling him to inform his Daxia comrades that their group was no longer Spade Gang, they were now Guild Alice. Showing off her charm, she stated that their new goal was to hunt down members of Shio's forces. Her boldness left Tyne and his men blushing and furious. They accused her of being shameless and vowed that the authorities would bring her to justice. In response, she teased them, implying that if they gave a good performance, she might act even more boldly. Shadow quietly observed from above. Tyne Xingjian clenched his fists, visibly frustrated. Shadow remembered that he was Chu Hanan, codenamed Tyne Xingjian, a key informant who once helped the Alice Guild but ultimately fell in the 7th year of the game. It intrigued him that Qiang Shishi and Chu Hanan were scheming together so early. He knew they were testing him. If he helped Qiang Shishi, he'd be seen as opposing the authorities. If he stayed neutral, she might refuse to meet in the real world. Taking a leap, Shadow dropped from the sky and unleashed Shadow Ring Blade, covering the area in a red aura that slowly drained the health of Tyne Xingjian and his men. The system confirmed their deaths. Qiang Shishi and her allies looked confused, unsure what had happened. As the bodies turned into lifespan orbs, Shadow finally revealed himself and introduced his name. Shadow introduced himself to Shishi, and the lady immediately started acting flirty, grabbing her chest and complimenting how handsome and powerful he looked. Yet deep inside, she felt a bit disappointed that Shadow was from her own country, not a foreigner with certain larger attributes. Still, she thought she couldn't be sure until she checked for herself. Two men who were with her were also excited to meet Shadow, impressed by the fact that he had dealt over 40,000 damage, a huge number for someone known as the global #1 player. But just as they greeted him, Shadow attacked without hesitation and split their heads open instantly. Since he couldn't understand their foreign language, their chatter annoyed him. He assumed they were cursing at him and decided to silence them permanently, just to be safe. Even though they were actually complimenting him, Shadow didn't care and simply muttered a small sorry to Shishi, telling her that to avoid future misunderstandings, she should only speak the native language from now on. Otherwise, he wouldn't hesitate to act again. Without wasting more time, he asked to begin the trade. But before that, he told Shishi to dress properly. Strangely, this excited her even more, as she found it fascinating that someone was immune to her charm. She wondered where Feng's mind was and started thinking that Shadow was just a weirdo who didn't want to look at her body, but she couldn't help loving it. Shadow then explained that although he had the target's head in reality, he couldn't bring it into the game as an item. However, if she wanted, he could show it to her in person. Impressed, Shishi believed in Shadow's power and trusted that he wouldn't deceive her. For his work, she paid him 1,500 days of tradable lifespan. After receiving the payment, Shadow turned to leave, but the girl called out to him again. As he turned around, she was now exposing even more cleavage, telling him that since he had the skills and she had the cash, they should team up for the long term. She revealed that she had a new assassination target and invited Shadow to her place that night, teasing that she'd fulfill any desire he had. But instead of reacting to the flirtation, Shadow bluntly asked who the target was and what the reward would be. Seeing that he was interested, Shishi decided to hold off the details and insisted that they meet at her place later. She assured him that the reward would be several times more than this one and told him to meet her at the magical city harbor that night. As she logged off, Shadow was surprised by how bold she was to call him to a private harbor. He figured she probably bought it to keep things secluded. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the officers who had been pinned down by Shadow at the safe zone portal. One officer couldn't believe Shadow had dared to slay him, but he comforted himself, thinking that since he had helped Shishi team up with Shadow, he would now get to enjoy the rewards she had promised him. However, in front of Lin, the white-haired female officer, he pretended to be a patriot, calling out others who associated with Shadow as fools. He insisted that Lin take everyone to claim their tradable lifespan quickly, so they could act later. But Lin wasn't that easily fooled. She had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. She couldn't believe Shadow would conspire with the Speed's gang. If it were true, she thought, even if it cost her life, she had to find a way to eliminate him. She also understood clearly how vast the power gap between her and Shadow was. She didn't even see him when he assassinated the officer. As night fell, Shadow arrived at the harbor and boarded Shishi's private yacht. He was heavily hooded to avoid being identified. Introducing himself again as Shadow, he told the crew he was there to meet the Ace of Spades, Shishi herself. Everyone was shocked to see the legendary Shadow in person. The captain was ordered to set sail and the ship left the dock. As it began moving, someone called out to Shadow from behind. Turning around, he saw Shishi dressed in a tight, revealing outfit that showed off all her curves. She was taken aback by how mysterious the real Shadow was, but quickly got to teasing. Shadow, however, didn't waste time and asked her directly who the target was. Shishi playfully complained that he had no sense of fun. She reminded him how rare it was for a beautiful woman like her to be in front of a man who wasn't even slightly affected. She brushed aside the serious talk and raised a toast to the enchanting night of spring, wanting to enjoy the moment first. To her surprise, Shadow immediately grabbed the wine, downed it in one gulp, and stayed silent. Shishi thought this meant her plan was working. She gently pushed him onto a soft couch and asked how he was feeling. It was then she revealed that the wine contained a special concoction known to boost male stamina by 100 times, used by her foreign friends to please her. According to her, anyone who drank it would fall under her control, and Shadow, being a man, would be no exception. Now flushed red with excitement, Shishi imagined all the things she could do with Shadow. She told him not to be nervous and to just enjoy, as she planned to reach the peak of the waves with him. She decided not to remove his hood just yet to keep things mysterious. She started speculating about how Shadow might look, clearly drunk and rambling nonsense about how there could be such magnificent men in their home country. Then she started slowly revealing herself, but as this part is censored, we'll leave it at that. She pulled down Shadow's pants and was shocked by the size, feeling the intense heat radiating from his body. Just then, a loud voice called for Shadow to show himself. Before she could react, she was instantly assassinated. Everything hot had suddenly turned into flames. A hand reached in and snatched the necklace from her neck, a protective crystal pendant she had kept hidden. It was a rare universal item that generated a shield every 300 seconds to absorb damage. The man who grabbed it was none other than Feng. The whole situation had been a trap, and Shishi had fallen right into it. Shocked, Shishi asked Feng how he was still alive, hadn't Shadow killed him. She believed Shadow was too powerful to fail. Feng calmly explained that the only reason he survived was because he was Shadow all along. Stunned, Shishi could only wonder, if Feng was the real Shadow, then who was the hooded man she'd just been with? We then see that the hooded figure was one of Shadow's undead followers, who was thoroughly enjoying all the attention and treatment Shishi had been giving him. Knowing that she would not survive because Shadow was there, she immediately slammed her head onto the ground multiple times while now calling Feng Daddy. And now this episode is officially out of bounds for children, but anyways. She didn't want to die, so she was ready to do anything for the boy, telling him to feel free to mistreat her in any way he liked, and to complete all the fantasies he had. All she wanted was for Shadow to spare her, and in return, she was ready to give her tradable lifespan and would forever be the boy's loyal servant. But Feng was actually getting annoyed, asking the lady about the 5 foreigners that she was with. The girl was crying while acting like a stupid person who always thought about naughty things, while she told Shadow that he would be told everything by her, after he promised that she wouldn't die by his hands. But before the girl could even finish her sentence, her head was twisted 180 degrees, and it was all over for her. After defeating the lady, Feng grabbed the phone and got a notification that he had gained 659 years of tradable lifespan. Even though Feng wanted to catch all the foreigners with Shishi herself, since they weren't there, he decided to call the officials using Shishi's phone so that no one would suspect him. As the scene shifted, a lot of police boats arrived near the yacht because they had received a report that a mass assassination had occurred on it, and one of the victims was also the heir of the Quinn group. According to the person who had reported it, the skills used by the killer closely resembled those of Shadow in the game, making it pretty much certain that they could identify the suspect. The search team was immediately dispatched to the crime scene. One of the police officers was actually cursing Shadow, while deep inside he just wanted the melons that the lady had, but now it was not possible. Such a brazen assassin, according to him, was blatantly challenging their laws. The officer told everyone that once aboard the ship, he would unleash his search skill so that he could find Shadow's actual location, and when it was found, the forces should open fire with full force immediately to ensure that the target would be eliminated. As the scene shifted inside the yacht, they saw the lifeless Shishi lying on the ground. One of the reporters revealed that the initial autopsy indicated the cause of death was a fractured cervical spine. They also found unidentified DNA samples in her oral cavities, accompanied by signs of burns. The officer thought that maybe before killing the lady, Shadow had done some naughty things with her. The officer then revealed his name as Nan, also known as Jian, who had an ability that allowed him, after touching the corpse of the lifeless, to gain the killer's location for 5 minutes, making it easy to find Shadow. But right after revealing the location, the officer knew that Shadow was just behind him. And even before he could take out his gun and shoot, Jian was assassinated as well, all his dreams of grabbing the oranges shattering in front of him. Meanwhile, Officer Lin was shocked. She put up a barrier given to her by the police and declared that Shadow had killed the investigator, wondering if he wanted to go against the officials. Now they were enemies. But suddenly a strange voice was heard by everyone, telling them that there was no need to be nervous, that the person had killed Jian because he had been feeding official intel to Shishi for his own game of grabbing oranges all this time, and he was a traitor. As for the evidence, it should be sitting on his phone, so they should check it out after unlocking it. One of the officers grabbed the brat's phone and told Captain Lin that he had found records of communication between Jian and Shishi on it. It was then that Lin understood that Shishi was actually the ace of spades in the game. She immediately grabbed the phone from the officer, and he blushed, knowing that it was going to be bad. But as the lady looked at the phone, she saw both of them really getting hot and kissing each other like crazy, wondering what on earth these photos were, and who even records this stuff. But as the lady was enjoying the view, she also knew that whatever Shadow had said was indeed true. Lin realized that the last time when Shadow had killed all of them was just to gain the lady's trust. And as he had gained her trust and found her in reality, he settled the score and then called the police himself, luring and killing Jian in the process. In an instant, the declaration of the alliance was approved by the Guardian, and Shadow was once again proving to everyone that he was a really terrifying man. Now Lin realized that it was a good thing the boy was not against the authorities, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Immediately, Lin remembered that she had fired a few shots at the boy and wondered if Shadow was holding a grudge against her for it. But it was irrelevant in the bigger picture, because the real trouble would be if Shadow went against the authorities. So the lady started saying words in a louder voice, telling Shadow that she appreciated his assistance and apologized for firing at him earlier. But to show her sincerity even more, Lin took out her gun and shot herself in the leg. As she started crying from the pain, everybody ran toward her, but she stopped them, telling Shadow that she had also taken a bullet which was meant for him, so he should continue to collaborate with the authorities and not change his mind. Meanwhile, the officers wondered if this was really necessary. But according to Lin, they had no idea what Shadow was like, so in any case, it was better safe than sorry. Meanwhile, Feng was invisible, unable to comprehend how Lin was so desperate to avoid being Shadow's enemy that she even fired a shot at herself. But truly, as Lin was going to be the official leader of the magic metropolis one day, she had all the qualities and shone brilliantly with her courage. As the scene shifted, we returned to the game, where we saw that Shadow's dumb sister was assisting another man in defeating various monsters. When the man called out to her and told her to cast healing on him, she once again missed and healed the monster instead. The man was really shocked at how messed up a dumb girl could actually be. And now that the monster was getting healed, even he was getting confused about whose side the human was on. Now a weird, man-eating plant-like monster ate both the man and Zhao, and both of them got teleported to the safe zone portal once again. But as the girl was crying, she was still so dumb that she wanted to blame others, thinking that it must be Shadow who had assassinated her, wondering why the boy was constantly targeting her. She thought maybe it was because she wanted to get revenge for Song, and Shadow came to know about it. But this time, the adventurer had enough. He slammed the girl's head onto the ground, calling her an idiot, along with some other not-so-friendly things, telling her that she wasn't some kind of most beautiful girl in the world that Shadow would have time to focus on. It was then that the adventurer explained to the dumb girl that they were wiped out by a platinum-level boss, the headless assassin, and wondered if the girl didn't even check the system alert, or if she was just so oblivious and wanted to blame others. The adventurer told her that the ability of the monster was triggered by her misfired healing skill. Being a high-level individual, he threatened the lady, telling her that if the president dared to assign her to his team once again, then he would definitely end it all. Zhao was crying because just a little punch had hurt the crybaby. But then two huge legs landed in front of the duo, and as the adventurer turned around, he was shaken to the core. The boss had actually followed them to the safe place and was now just ahead, so they could not escape in any way. The adventurer didn't waste any time running for his life, leaving the girl alone as she stood there petrified. As the scene shifts, we come to a giant house where we see that a plate has fallen onto the ground. A girl came running inside after throwing the plate, saying to someone on the phone that he was a waste of space because he had wasted a golden opportunity to take down Shadow. Even when he was in the official rank, he was not able to do anything, despite laying low in the official scene for so many years. Yet, whenever it truly mattered, he was just utterly useless. We come to know that this girl was from the Eastern clan, and she wanted to get her revenge on Shadow because he had slaughtered her entire Eastern clan. According to her, the blood of her Eastern family cannot be shed in vain, no matter what method the man chose. She told him that Shadow must pay for the blood that he had spilled. The lady then intimidated the man on the phone, telling him that, as his father-in-law had also met his end by Shadow's hand, he should also do something and not just rest around. A strange-looking human appeared behind the lady and told her that he had a plan that could vanquish Shadow. The boy looked really dangerous and psychotic, and behind him was the body of the naughty lady. As the lady turned around, we come to know that the boy was named Tian, and the lady wondered if he had any tricks up his sleeve because the game forsaken by the god only allowed adults over 18 to enter the realm of the game, and he still could not get in even if he wanted to. We come to know that this Tian boy was a psychotic brat who was also the son of the lady. He told his mom that even though he couldn't dive into the game just yet, he could still flex his brain power, He asked his mom if Shadow was fond of killing, thinking that he would send a few folks to take him out. Then he could set Shadow up at his dad's fireworks factory, getting everything ready in advance. And when Shadow came to take out the folks, they would ignite the whole factory so that the thousands of fireworks would become Shadow's funeral offerings, allowing the whole world to witness his demise. And even if they failed, Shadow would never be able to reach them because of their status. After hearing her son, the lady smiled, happy that the teachings of their family had worked well on Tian. She turned toward the man and called him Mr. Chu. It is then that we come to know Mr. Chu was actually the husband of the lady and the father of the child. But still, he was scolded by the lady, who told him that his son was more useful than him. Mr. Chu told the lady that whatever they were planning needed to be kept under wraps, because the official stance toward Shadow was still focused on winning him over. So his big brother and second brother would not be able to help the family in this. The lady realized that she would have to take care of the matter herself and decided to do it anyway. But suddenly, as the scene shifts once again, the lady turned towards Tian, asking him what the matter was and why the lowly peasant still refused to hand over her lifespan. It is then that we come to know the boy was completely psychotic, apologizing to his mom that he couldn't hold back for a moment and had actually ended her life. The scene shifts back to the game Forsaken by the God, where we come to the ruins of the demonic metropolis. We see that the Dark Sister was getting slashed once again, and everyone else saw it, witnessing the demise of the group who suddenly dropped dead. We see that someone went invisible and took them out in a heartbeat, finishing them off without any mercy. The others who were still alive decided to make a run for it, thinking that Shadow had gone mad and was slaughtering innocents everywhere. But we see that Shadow was not even in the game. He was using his powers in real life. Looking at the beautiful scenery, we come to know that Shadow wanted to move his hideout right near the beach, deciding to extract it into reality, costing him 1,315 years of his life to bring forth the pure soul realm. As the hideout was an underground structure, the notification suggested Shadow mark it on a map. With a final warning, the notification told him that after extracting the hiding place, all materials overlapping with it would be annihilated. It asked whether the boy would confirm it or not. After confirmation was done, a giant building appeared right underground in the sea. After appearing, it broke down all the land that was in between. Shadow saw a pothole-like thing just above the water where he was standing. As the scene shifts, we see that a huge building had now appeared on the surface beneath the sea, but it would still not be visible to anyone else because it was soon going to be hidden by water. The notification told the boy that the extraction was complete. He knew that it was time for him to go and fetch the divine tomb. But suddenly a call appeared as soon as the boy entered the game. Feng was asking him if he was on a rampage slaughtering players because someone had reported it. Shadow was shocked, but Feng was a bit of a genius himself and had already noticed that Shadow was not online at all. So it was not him, and the situation did not involve him. After that, he dug a little deeper, and it turned out that the man who was impersonating Shadow was actually a platinum-level boss. The name of it was the Headless Assassin, who was attacking players relentlessly. Because her stealth level was sky-high, no one could see her. So Feng wondered if Shadow was going to make a move and do something. As the scene shifts to that place once again, we see that multiple adventurers were slaughtered because of the Headless Assassin. Even one of Feng's teammates was shocked because she wondered what kind of over-the-top platinum numbers it was. Even after having level 3 anti-invisibility skill, she was not able to detect it. She was just not able to see it, or otherwise she could have held everything off. But it was completely different. She thought that even if Shadow were to come, the boss would be completely helpless. Suddenly, another girl told the man to keep it down because she didn't want to attract the boss's attention. In short, she ordered everyone to head upwards first so that their view would be better from there. But just when the boy started getting up and walking, he ran straight onto a banana peel and slipped, doing a 360 while the girl and the other team member were slaughtered instantly by the boss. The man was not able to comprehend how it had happened, but still, it had already been done, and the Headless Assassin was right in front of him. Now he was the one who would have to do something. But the Headless Assassin was not that easy to defeat. She gave a proper fight and even tried to kick the man. As he started dodging and rolling, he knew that he rolled too soon. He was just like a new player in Elden Ring who only rolls away and is not able to do anything. The man was constantly rolling, getting dizzy with every passing second, and the headless assassin just waited for this stupidity to end. He rolled, and then finally dropped on the ground because his eyes were all blurry, and he was not able to see the headless assassin properly. Thinking that it had vanished, but the platinum-level boss was still there, immediately coming closer to the boy and slamming him down, killing him in one fell swoop while she started celebrating because the stupidity was finally over. But a blue flame appeared in the sky, and the platinum-level boss wondered who it was. Before anyone could do anything, we all know it was none other than Shadow himself, who got onto the back of the platinum boss monster and stabbed her in the back so that she could not move anymore, jokingly asking the boss if her name was Radish because she was completely white and cut from the top, just like a radish top. We go into a flashback just moments before Shadow appeared. Among the ruins, the dumb sister was getting completely obliterated by the other team members, who were all convinced it was her fault the healing spell was unleashed on the headless assassin. Now, because the boss had locked onto her, it was trailing her all the way to the resurrection point, slaughtering everyone in its path. Even when the sister tried to put on a cute face and claimed she didn't mean to do it, the men were too annoyed to care. They told the president that this kind of trashy woman wasn't even worth being in their radius, let alone on their team. By the time she acted, they'd all be long dead. Still, the president told them to keep it down in fear of attracting the boss. Though he was angry too, asking Zhao if she was really cut out for battle or not. He didn't think so. From now on, he ordered she should just focus on cracking down on hiding spots. If she managed to find a golden hideout, he'd reward her with 3 extra years of life. And if she found a platinum level one, then 10 years. But deep down, the president was disappointed. When he first saw her hidden class, he thought he'd struck gold, but she turned out completely useless. Even after giving her everything, she was still dying to the weakest monsters, wasting resources every day. So he gave her just 2 extra days of tradable life. The sister thanked him again, despite having only 2 days and 13 hours left. Meanwhile, the other girls were frustrated, wondering how she kept getting privileges and the president's attention. They assumed she was scheming and decided to start acting like that too, so they could win the president over themselves. Suddenly, while the group was still hiding, Shadow finished off the headless assassin boss in a flash, descending to the floor and shocking everyone. The president was so furious he beat one of his own subordinates in frustration. This should never have happened. But before anyone could respond, the entire ground began to tremble. Something heavy was coming closer, and the atmosphere started changing. It was all focused around the dumb sister. The president, seeing the danger, kicked her off to protect the rest of the group. She flew into the air, carried by something invisible. Thanks to Shadow's high-level anti-invisibility skill, he was able to see the swarm of headless assassin bosses surrounding her, all preparing to end her. Now, everyone else could see them too. No one had believed there were actually 5 headless assassin bosses, but 4 were still alive, and only one had been killed by Shadow earlier. It now made sense why it had always felt like the boss was everywhere. The sister saw Shadow and thought she was saved. Crying and begging, she finally called him brother, hoping to appeal to his better side. Somehow that awakened the small sliver of humanity left in Shadow. Powering up, he activated his Shadow Assassin technique and began slashing through the bosses at incredible speed. Using Shadow Slash, he earned 48,000 XP, 20 evolution points, and 1,520 days of tradable lifespan. But it turned out that the girl was also slain in the chaos along with the bosses. Shadow didn't care, he only lamented that the loot was too little. He decided to activate Hand of Greed to boost the drops, knowing that aside from the 1,520 days built into the bosses, they were also holding onto orbs filled with lifespans they had siphoned from other players but hadn't digested yet. Just then, Captain Anya and Feng ran up to Shadow, cheerfully offering to buy any loot he didn't need. He was a bit annoyed by how omnipresent the country's police force was, but it was convenient this time because he knew a treasure-rich location that would be perfect to raid. If the price was right, he was willing to guide them there. The captain was happy, but the system denied her entry. Shadow only allowed Meng to join him. The place was off-limits to women. Anya, now trying a different approach, acted seductive and teased him, asking if he only liked men. She wouldn't be offended either way, she said. She had an open mind. Shadow simply slammed a foreflick onto her forehead, scolding her for being a bad girl, and walked away with the male members. As they followed, he told them the place they were headed to stood just outside the northern city gate, the towering temple of divine authority. Whoever conquered its challenges would be rewarded with unimaginable treasure. But there was one catch. The NPCs inside hated women, and their presence would increase the dungeon's difficulty tenfold. Now genuinely angry, Anya said she would level up and return. These sexist NPCs would pay. She rallied the other girls to head to the mountains to scout out the path and vent their frustrations on minor monsters. As they left, they waved goodbye to Shadow, who began forming his party. The others were nervous, as this was their first time teaming up with such a high-ranking figure. But Meng reassured them that it was a chance to learn from the true master of disguise. Still, following Shadow was not easy. Even though he seemed to move leisurely, his speed was astonishing, far beyond what anyone else could match. They quickly fell about 2 kilometers behind. Meanwhile, Shadow checked the loot. Of the 20 items he got, only 2 were useful for assassins. The first was the Forest Bone Blade, an emerald-colored assassin-class weapon with 39 strength and 48 agility. It required level 15 to equip, had 388 attack power, and 125 armor penetration. Its unique effect granted a 30% evasion rate and doubled movement speed for 5 seconds after triggering the double-speed effect. Shadow compared it to his poison blade and realized this weapon had 80% more attack power, plus armor penetration and stat boosts, making it solid gear. The second item was the Shadow Blade, a platinum-level dagger forged from pure dark elemental essence. It added 600 points of dark element attack on hit and dispelled a random buff. Though its single-target dark element damage wasn't massive, the dispel effect made it impressive. Shadow spent 56 evolution points to upgrade it to legendary status, leaving him with 219 points remaining. Once upgraded, it gained an additional bonus. If the weapon hit a weak spot, it refunded 3 seconds of cooldown. With a base cooldown of just 3.78 seconds, that meant Shadow's skill cooldown would be reduced to just 0.7 seconds, an incredible boost. As he turned to continue, Shadow noticed only number 1 was still following him. Meng and the others were still far behind, struggling to keep up. Captain Anya pushed them forward, reminding everyone that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and they couldn't afford to fall behind. Shadow reached a mysterious-looking tower and finally told everyone that this was the stop they were trying to find. He explained that once they stepped inside, an NPC would present them with a challenge. The NPC was so well-trained that the stronger the player performed, the more it would pull the rug out from under them and make them fight even stronger opponents. So Shadow wanted the whole team to seize the opportunity using the lower-level players, and decided to unleash only 1% of his power, planning for them to take down the golden boss and become rich once again. But as he turned around, he saw that Meg and the other team members looked almost lifeless. Just as it was getting awkward, Meng woke up from the ground, his hands still shivering, while he assured Shadow not to worry because they would make sure the mission was completed. Shadow turned around once again and started going inside the building, telling everyone that once they conquered the challenges, they could snag some great stuff from the NPC and would not be disappointed. However, they needed to remember to keep their team channel chat going and not let the NPC eavesdrop, as it could strategize according to their plan. After saying all this, Shadow opened the giant, humongous door, which creaked loudly as it swung open. Inside was a wizard-like NPC floating above the ground, who welcomed everyone into the building, calling them the residents of the game forsaken by the gods. He said the arrival of this game had left humans trembling with unease, which he found amusing and started laughing. The wizard then introduced everyone to the Tower of Divine Authority, telling them that if they could conquer the challenges inside, they would be able to trade with the Wanderer and should let him know whenever they were ready. Some people couldn't believe there were NPCs in the game, but others were curious about the kind of boss they needed to take down and what it would look like. Shadow wasn't in the mood for too many questions, telling them to follow his commands so things would be straightforward. But the adventurers kept pressing, asking how long the battle would last, what different phases the boss had, what skills made it so powerful, whether the scoring was mechanism-based or value-based, if there were any instant kill moves, how much agility it had, its weak spots, signature skills, and the duration of the battle. Meng told Shadow not to worry about him, saying he'd been cautious ever since his past team was annihilated by monsters. But Shadow was getting annoyed and immediately approached the Wanderer, saying he was ready and that the trial should begin. The man ran behind Shadow, trying to stop him, but it was too late. The Wanderer smiled and announced that the enjoyment would begin now. As the trial started, a purple portal appeared on the ground using a purple shard, and from the portal emerged an ugly-looking monster, split in half, called the Obsidian Shard Skull Puppet, a level 20 gold tier boss. Everyone was shocked upon seeing the system notification, as the highest level monster they had encountered until now was only level 11. The Obsidian Skull charged at the adventurers, but Shadow told them not to worry and to focus on defeating it. Meng got ready with his high-level shield, but one adventurer was immediately devoured by the monster as it rushed forward. The monster attacked Meng's shield recklessly, throwing him several meters and even impacting Shadow, making him unstable. The adventurers were unsure of what to do, but Meng told them not to worry about him and ordered the archer to use his starry shot skill, along with giving orders to the swordsman. As the adventurers followed the captain's orders, they managed to damage the monster, though it wasn't enough. The monster entered its second phase, glowing with a purple aura that gave it even more power. Shadow, watching carefully, knew the boss had gone berserk and told the adventurers to stay out of the way so he could finish it off. The boy immediately took something out of his inventory and rushed toward the monster at insane speed. As he jumped and threw his night dagger, it dealt 4,500 damage to the obsidian skull. Shadow didn't stop there. He began using his night technique repeatedly, heavily damaging the monster. The adventurers realized that Shadow was equipped with gear far beyond anything they'd seen before. He moved with grace, assassinating the monster without being pinned down even once. The NPC had initially thought Shadow was a complete noob, but now it was clear that was far from the truth, and the Wanderer had no time to strategize. One of the adventurers, confused, asked how Shadow knew that the stronger the player, the pricier the goods would be, since no one should know about the hidden boss. Shadow dodged the question, replying that the game forsaken by the gods was shrouded in secrets, with many truths buried deep within the ruins. He began to confuse the adventurers further, telling them to ask themselves whether they had been exploring diligently or expanding their knowledge of the game. Just as they were making awkward faces, the monster began using a death beam skill, forming a yellow orb of energy in its mouth. Shadow warned everyone to be alert and avoid the spin of the energy ball, explaining that 3 seconds after it hits the ground, the damage would become lethal and the area of effect massive. The adventurers scattered, and Meng ran toward Shadow to protect him. Realizing there was no time to dodge the attack, Shadow told Meng to unleash his invincibility scale to shield them. Meng did so, successfully protecting both Shadow and the curious adventurer. It was a great move. Shadow told the captain to wait for the flames to die down and then unleash their most powerful skills. After 3 seconds, the flames subsided, and all the adventurers used their best attacks. The damage was brutal, more than 25,000. The monster was finally defeated, and a notification popped up announcing that they had defeated the Obsidian Shard Skull Puppet. The words "Congratulations" appeared on the board, and the team felt proud of themselves. Shadow, however, knew that once the boss's health dropped below 70%, it would enter a berserk state. If they could dispel the berserk effect, its power would only be on par with a silver-tier boss. As they looked at the defeated monster, the Wanderer smiled and congratulated them for being the first to pass his test. Now, all they needed to do was trade their lifespan in exchange for a divine gift from the legendary Wanderer. A system notification popped up, telling everyone that the Vander NPC was actually named Wizard Wake, and that he had 6 fingers. But suddenly, the NPC started acting weirdly, and his eyes began glittering with laser-sharp focus as he attacked one of the players all of a sudden, obliterating them with 99,999 damage. Captain Meng was shocked, wondering why the NPC Vander suddenly attacked. But Shadow knew that even when players were powerful, the wandering NPC was actually way more powerful than them. Shadow also knew about a secret rule: NPCs and players could not attack each other unless the player broke a sacred rule first. And this NPC's sacred rule was to hide his hands. As long as no one mentioned it, he was in the clear. Hearing that, Meng even wondered if they could beat him, but Shadow straight up denied it because they were powerless right now. In truth, these NPCs were powerful beings from other dimensions who had attained divinity, and in front of them, humans were nothing. The Wanderer began telling the players to choose the divine tomes they needed and trade their lifespans for the treasures so that they could leave. These divine beings were shackled by the ancient rules of existence, arriving on the planet to help the game but sickened by the god, harvesting the lifespan of the players. Meng was shocked to learn that these NPCs could also consume life force to create resources in the real world. Meng immediately realized that the wandering merchant could create anything, and they would have an endless supply of food, water, and drinks. With the divine tomes they had, thanks to Shadow, no matter what disaster struck them, their supplies would always be safeguarded. They started celebrating even before Shadow knew the reason for it, because they expected this much from him, thinking their big brother would never let them down. But Shadow didn't care and started browsing through the NPC's window, buying a book named Divine Bestowal Asterisk, which was one of the 9 divine tomes that would cover all of Shadow's needs. He knew that the Tower of Divine Power had an achievement granting prestigious rewards, but Shadow would have to conquer it. The first book required 9,000 days of tradable lifespan in exchange. He looked at the Wanderer NPC and told him that he wanted to take the highest difficulty, and with no one's help. The NPC started laughing, telling Shadow that based on his recent performance, he couldn't even conquer the first level, and now he dared to dream of tackling the highest difficulty. But Shadow simply said he was curious about how the highest difficulty looked. The NPC explained that the difficulty was divided into 5 levels, with the highest being the 5th level. The boss was still the golden tier obsidian shattered skull puppet, but its attack, health, defense, and cooldown speed had been skyrocketed by 500%. Both Meng and his friends were stunned by the percentage, realizing that they had barely dodged the skill of the basic monster. They were drenched in sweat, wondering how Shadow would dodge the higher tier one, which now had 5 times the health and defense. They wondered how long it would take to bring it down with no mistakes allowed at all. The NPC told Shadow that if he died in this challenge, all the tradable lifespan he would lose would go straight to the Wanderer, and it was not returnable. Finally, he asked Shadow if he really wanted to do it. The boy immediately agreed. Hearing that, the NPC started laughing as he formed a blue aura portal with his hands, thanking Shadow for the thought of gifting some lifespan to the NPC for his own use. He thought that in this early game of the Forsaken Gods, players from the planet had really become so arrogant that they were paving their own path to self-destruction. Just after saying that, the blue portal changed its color to gold, and the obsidian skull crusher monster puppet appeared, now 500% more powerful and golden in color. Shadow immediately analyzed his foe from top to bottom, realizing that Vic had enhanced the summoned monster by 500% and had also made multiple biological enhancements, skyrocketing its attributes by more than 2,000%. Shadow knew it was the perfect time to test out his new weapon. He became invisible, took out the undead dagger, and threw it toward the golden obsidian monster, using the venomous strike attack. After the strike landed successfully, the gift of the black flame was triggered, and the obsidian shadow puppet began screaming in pain as it was slowly hammered by our boy. Shadow immediately started using his bone blade special effect, which boosted his agility for 5 more seconds along with his invincibility, which was increased. Shadow started absorbing the golden aura, and after his agility was at its peak, he began making small attacks. Suddenly, he teleported behind the golden obsidian skull using the special effect given to him by the undead bone blade and pierced through the head of the monster. The speed boost of 100% was already over as the 5 seconds finished, but that was enough for Shadow to make the monster bleed. Both Meng and his subordinate wondered how Shadow was really invisible all the time, wondering if his cooldown was low or if there wasn't one to begin with. The subordinate thought that maybe Shadow hadn't even activated his invisibility, and instead, he was so fast that he vanished into thin air. Shadow appeared in front of the fallen monster, realizing that the work was over when the notification told him to strike at the throat to grant liberation to the monster. Shadow started using his Shadow Sneak attack, and as multiple blades pierced the monster, it was completely obliterated in just a few seconds, with the HP bar dropping to 64%. But the monster was still not defeated, somehow getting up again. Shadow already realized the resilience of the monster, and knew he would have to use his Shadow Sneak Slash multiple times to give the monster maximum damage, because only one strike was not enough, even when a third of the monster's health was dropped by one hit. Even doing this sequence of attacks 2 more times was hectic because of the monster's resilience. On the other hand, the NPC was getting cold feet, wondering how it was possible, because the Forsaken Game of the Gods had just opened its gate on Shadow's planet, and there was no way someone could be this powerful this early in the game. It was so troublesome that it was bothering the wandering NPC, Wizard. But Shadow was not going to stop, immediately activating his throat-slit attack and inflicting 200% of his attack damage per second. This attack was enough to constantly damage the monster and finally finish it off after 2 more slashes. The system congratulated Shadow for conquering the 5th-level challenge of the Tower of Divine Authority and gaining 5 prestige points as the achievement was complete. The system showcased Shadow's victory in the first 4 years of difficulty, along with the highest one to everyone. Shadow had also earned a dazzling 10 points of reputation, while the system congratulated him for completing the Tower of Divine Authority solo and clearing this challenge for the first time. In total, Shadow had earned 75 points of prestige, and a huge notification popped up in front of everyone that player Shadow had conquered the Tower of Divine Authority. But to everyone's surprise, no one knew what the Tower of Authority actually was, because no one had figured it out yet. Some thought their city was a wasteland, so there wasn't a single tower structure. Others were fearful that Shadow was walking ahead of them over and over again. Meanwhile, the NPC was agonizing over his decisions, telling Shadow that he was scamming him and that the planet folks were so cunning. If the wandering wizard had known this fact about his powers, he would have charged them a fortune of tradable lifespan for any divine book. The NPC was so angry that he started using his teleportation skill along with his laser skill, furious at being scammed, and told the humans he never wanted to see them again. Captain Meng wondered what the NPC was up to, and his subordinate thought maybe he was about to bring out the big guns. But just then, Shadow appeared, and as the attack was about to hit them, the boy was calm and composed because he knew it was nothing but a teleportation array. As they exited the Tower of Divine Authority, everyone was relieved to realize that they were in the outside world, not dead, and instead had just been ported out. Shadow reminded them of the rule that NPCs cannot attack players if the rule was not broken. The boy explained that since they had wrapped up everything, they should call it a day, because now Shadow was logging off to grab a bite. The captain thanked Shadow again and again for enlightening them, promising that if there was ever a chance like this again, they must tag along to reap the benefits. Shadow agreed and started walking away. As the scene shifts to the real world, we see that inside the castle, which was protected underwater, the huge building stood tall. The 9 divine books were extracted, consuming 90 days of tradable lifespan by Shadow. He also spent 1.06 years of life buying luxurious furniture, daily essentials, and delectable ingredients, and also an all-powerful artificial intelligence maid, which happily greeted her master. It was her pleasure to meet our boy for the first time, as she asked Feng if he was looking for someone to help him in handling affairs at home. She explained that the boy should feel free to reach out with any requests, and he should just say the word. The maid was there to help him, even in that. Yes, even in what you all are thinking. Shadow explained to the maid that she should tidy up the house and whip up a feast for him, and the maid started working immediately, diving into full house cleaning mode right away. In the outside world, we come back to the city where we see a body lying on the ground, lifeless, with a white cloth covering it. We come to know that it was a female corpse discovered this week, the 3rd one in the continuous parade of bodies. Just like the previous 2, the body's limbs had been taken out, and the eyes were also missing. The investigators realized that the killer must be the same person. One of the officers asked if the investigator had found any clues, and the other officer explained that even the investigator was finding it difficult to get clues regarding this psychopath. The killer was coming out at the perfect time, something not taken into consideration while the investigator searched for evidence, and he was always able to escape. The senior officer told another subordinate that they should go and ask Captain Anya how much longer it would take for the investigator to advance in his career, because they could not delay the matter any further and must catch the psychopath killer. Suddenly, the other officer tried telling the senior something and explained that maybe it was the work of Shadow, because he compared the timeline of Shadow's activity, and it perfectly aligned with the girl's time of demise. But the senior straight up told him that maybe it was just a coincidence, because matching timelines was not enough to prove anything. However, the investigator liked this angle and thought they could solve the case through it, because right now whispers were all around that Shadow was actually a killer in disguise and might have some dark influence on others, and that some evil powers were covering up for him. It was then that the senior revealed that last time, Shadow made him look foolish in front of Captain Anya when he was hitting on her. But the senior wanted the brat to not let personal feelings come between them and their jobs, because they already had 24-hour support from the police. They needed to crack the case wide open and bring justice. Now, however, the brat was angry because he was not allowed to work on the angle of Shadow being the killer. As the scene shifts to the game once again, we come inside the ruins of the demon city in the godforsaken game, and we see that Shadow was invisible while looking at a castle that was still standing and had not been destroyed. Shadow knew this place was called the Evil Spirit Academy, and this academy was a platinum-grade hideaway. Even though it was not concealed, its barrier's strength was said to be the mightiest in all of the country. Shadow started forming the Shadow Gear, losing 2.74 years of tradable lifespan in the process, because he needed to secure the hideout outside under the banner of his own guild. That's why he had to resort to this method and lose his lifespan, even when he was in the Wasteland City. The boy knew that shelters could teleport between each other, and from now on, traveling back and forth between the magic metropolis and the river city would be a breeze because of the two hideouts in Shadow's possession. After forming the guild, the boy started going inside while still being invisible to any threat looming inside the castle. As he walked through, he felt that something was strange, because he had reached the deepest level of the 3 underground floors inside the Spirit Academy, yet he had not encountered even a single monster. Shadow realized there was no other possible explanation than that someone powerful had already come inside and defeated all the monsters before him. Suddenly, he heard someone screaming in happiness to another human that he was not as weak as he seemed. After Shadow listened to the commotion, he realized that some people were bullying another person, a female, who was telling the group of 3 thugs not to come any closer. Out of the 3 thugs, one of the fatties revealed that they were sent by the Dongfang family lady and told her not to worry because they were not going to kill the girl just yet, as the Dongfang lady needed someone for her enjoyment. But before that, these boys were going to enjoy the girl themselves. They wanted her to hurry up and tell them her real-world location, or they threatened to hunt her down until her lifespan ran out. Even making herself lose would not help her, because the Brats guild named Shura's Hall was waiting at the resurrection point. The third person from the police group told the lady they should make a deal, because the girl was powerful in her own right, having defeated the Eastern deity twice in the game. The boy realized she must have gained quite a bit of lifespan, at least 30 years. The boy then started rambling that the girl had to give them 30 years of the lifespan she had gained, and along with that, she would have to play with the 3 of them for a little while to make them feel good. After that, they promised they would let her go without any problems. The girl, innocent, started crying and asked in horror what they meant by playing with them. The 3 of them started smiling as they took out their 2 inches, which were hanging down. Seeing that, the girl was scared, but the men thought they were really masculine, smiling after looking at her. Knowing there was no escape, the girl wanted them to promise that after having all their fun, they would let her go. The brown-haired brat called the girl, promising her again and telling her to start with him. As the girl started nearing the boy, a surprise attack was made at his small thing, as the lady tried chopping it off. But the third person, with bandages over his eyes, immediately attacked the lady, calling her a troublemaker for thinking like that. The brat once again came back near the girl, telling her this was her final chance to correct everything. But suddenly the girl smiled and told the player she would see him later. Then the players were slashed in two halves so suddenly that they didn't even realize it. Even the man in bandages was being choked by long strips of paper, which were completely full of magic and worked like chains. Shadow was watching everything, realizing that this skill was named the Chained Blade, wondering if the girl's profession was what he thought it was. The girl finally stood up, using her skill and cursing the three brats who were trying to do naughty things with her. Knowing these people were sent by the Dongfang lady, she was determined to kill her no matter what. We come to know that Shadow knew about this lady who was named Shane, and Shane was also hiding a profession just like our boy Shadow. It was an assassin-type unique hidden profession. Shadow knew that in his last life, Shane was the 10th strongest powerhouse in the whole world, but she was eventually defeated by the present demon, who dealt the final blow after her real identity was exposed. He targeted her in the real world while she was already being hunted from all sides. The girl fought valiantly, but even after all the effort she put in, she was still not able to survive. Everyone in the Guild of Shadow was devastated when they heard the news, and even Shadow himself couldn't believe that he would run into her inside the sanctuary. However, Shadow didn't know who Dongfang Yui was, and he kept wondering why Shane was repeating this name again and again. As Shadow approached her, Shane assumed he was an enemy too. She asked if he had any accomplices and immediately rushed toward him. Talisman chains protruded from her hands, ready to attack our boy even before he could defend himself. And even when Shadow wanted to speak to her, she cut him off, telling him to talk less and concentrate, or he would die. Shane hurled her talisman chain blade towards Shadow, attempting to bind him with its sturdy chains. But before it could reach him, Shadow turned into smoke, evading the attack fluidly and reappearing instantly in front of Shane. Finally, he agreed to play with her if she wasn't ready to talk. This shocked the girl, but it was already too late. She would have to fight. She jumped back and lashed her talisman chains toward the boy once again. Being an assassin-type professional as well, Shane turned into smoke herself, activating invisibility and vanishing without a trace. At first, Shadow was alert, but then he laughed at her audacity, pulling an assassination trick in front of him. He couldn't believe she thought invisibility would work. So he answered in kind, also vanishing without leaving the slightest trace in the visible world. Time passed in silence. Neither of them appeared on the battlefield. Shane was the first to re-emerge, confused about where Shadow had gone. Her Hellblade had built-in level 4 stealth detection, yet she still couldn't sense him. She couldn't believe it. Then she remembered hearing about someone named Shadow, ranked at the top of the entire game leaderboard, with powers eerily similar to the one she was fighting now. Suddenly, Shadow appeared right in front of her, causing Shane to scream in shock. He mockingly told her that she should figure out how to deal with him, or things would get very bad for her. But the girl wasn't ready to give up. She kept leaping around, attacking with her talisman chains, though she still couldn't believe her level 4 invisibility and stealth detection skills were useless against him. Frustrated, she decided to unleash her trump card, chasing Soul's spirit of the ghost path. With this move, the talisman gained a consciousness of its own, moving like a living being. It was her strongest attack, though it consumed a lot of energy. But to Shadow, it was still nothing. He calmly observed the chain writhing like a snake, hissing and moving on its own. He quickly realized that the chains, now with their own will, were able to locate him, even when invisible. The technique was so powerful it could sense enemies Shane's eyes couldn't see, and anyone marked by it could not escape. For the first time, Shadow saw her profession bypass stealth entirely. Even he hadn't expected this. But he had a plan. As he ran in circles around her, he baited her into attacking. Just as she thought she had him, Shadow slipped away with incredible agility, leaving Shane caught in her own skill. Embarrassingly, the chains wrapped around her due to her own attack, tightening against her clothing. Shadow walked up to her calmly and asked if it was the right time to talk, since her ears seemed open. He explained that he was Shadow and had nothing to do with any Dongfang Yui. If he wanted to kill her, she would have been long dead. He didn't need help with that. Shane was embarrassed, screaming at him to let her down. Shadow, however, asked who Dong Fang Yui was. From her words, he deduced she must mean someone from the Dong Fang family in Jianghai City. The girl was shocked but eventually admitted it, explaining that since Dong Fang Yui had married into the Chu family, her ties to the Dong Fang family weren't as close anymore. Shadow then revealed something shocking. When he destroyed the Dong Fang family, Dong Fang Yui hadn't been present. She slipped through because of her marriage. This stunned Shane. The realization that Shadow had destroyed the Dong Fang family, leaving only Yui alive, sent chills through her. But then she smirked through her chains, declaring that since Shadow and Dong Fang Yui were enemies, she would consider him her ally, because the enemy of an enemy is a friend. They could cooperate. Shadow dropped her to the ground, telling her they could discuss cooperation later, but first he wanted to know why she wanted to kill Dong Fang Yui. Shane finally revealed the truth. It was revenge. Before the God-forsaken realm descended and the game began, Dong Fang Yui had been driving under the influence and caused an accident that killed Shane's mother. Multiple court cases were filed, but Yui walked free because the Chu family used their influence to frame someone else. Her father refused to accept it and even found evidence to convict Dong Fang Yui. But the very next day, he was found dead in the river. Authorities dismissed it as a mental breakdown, claiming he had taken his own life out of despair. When Shane demanded answers, the Chu family's security nearly beat her to death. Broken and hopeless, she thought about ending her own life until the God-forsaken game descended. Her first mission inside the game was clear: kill Dong Fang Yui. But in the game, death was never permanent unless someone drained all your life by repeatedly killing you. So even after Shane succeeded once, Yui resurrected and hired people to relentlessly hunt Shane down. That was why she was in this state now, being saved by Shadow. Shane cried while explaining all this, begging Shadow to help her kill Dong Fang Yui, as revenge was her only motivation to live. But to everyone's surprise, Shadow refused, without even a second of hesitation. After the refusal, Shane was shocked but still not ready to give up. She told Shadow not to worry because she would not make the boy help her for free. She decided to give him everything she had, including her body, which could become the Shadow's servant. She was even ready to offer her entire lifespan that she had earned, along with all her equipment and skills. Shane was prepared to sacrifice everything as long as Shadow helped her kill Dong Fang Yui without any second thoughts. Even if Shadow made her his slave, Shane was willing to accept it willingly. But the boy was not as bad as everyone thought. He told Shane that he would not help in any killing, nor would he take revenge in her place, because this revenge had to be concluded by her own two hands. Even when Shane felt bad, Shadow told her that he would help her, but how far his help could go depended on her. The lady was shocked, still crying and wondering how Shadow was going to help her. Then the boy revealed that he wanted Shane to join his guild and become his ally so he could support her in achieving her revenge. A system notification popped up and the lady read everything. Shadow wanted her to join his guild, also named Shadow. She realized that the guild had only one member, our boy, Shadow himself. She wondered if all she had to do was just join the guild, and if that alone would be enough. But now Shane joined the guild because Shadow requested it, and her in-game name, Ghost, appeared on the guild list. Our boy also accepted the lady's friend request and was happy that she agreed to do whatever he asked. He told her that now she only needed to do one more thing: career advancement to the next level. As for what career advancement was and how to achieve it, she would have to explore that herself. Whenever she succeeded, Shadow would help her. But if she failed, Shane had to be ready to forget about any kind of revenge she wanted, because currently she was too powerless. The scene shifted to another place, where we saw Shadow inside the secret sanctuary, realizing that the blade of the underworld had limitless potential. Since Shane was already given a little guidance, Shadow knew that she was stubborn, and with her big heart, she would definitely take one step at a time. He believed that whenever she matured, she might even be able to help Shadow, who was considered the strongest character right now. The scene shifted once again to the deepest part of the Evil Spirit Academy, where Shadow entered a section that looked like a giant library filled with books. While invisible, the boy encountered the transmutated witch named Stana, a level 15 golden grade witch with multiple heads, and the body of a female wearing a long, frilled dress. We learned that this witch was the guardian of the Evil Spirit Academy. Without wasting any time, Shadow launched an assassination attack, damaging one of Stana's 4 heads. He knew that in the first phase, only one of the boss's 4 heads would activate, and then they would become immune to physical damage. From then on, Shadow could only use elemental skills with slightly lower damage, but still enough to deal a lot of harm. With the assassination, the boy activated the Shadow Blade technique and drew the Forest Bone Blade to increase his movement speed. Its cooldown time was so low that it almost recharged instantly after every Shadow Blade hit. The boy jumped around, using his invisibility and assassin skills along with multiple Shadow Blade techniques to deal massive damage to the witches' heads. He kept targeting the weak points, turning himself into a moving Gatling gun with such high damage that no one could resist. Shadow had no pride to spare. He kept relentlessly attacking the weak points because he had to defeat the monster no matter what. The sounds of hacking and slashing echoed through the entire hall until one of the 4 heads was destroyed, exploding into pieces. Now Phase 2 began, and Shadow knew that all 3 remaining heads would activate simultaneously. They were furious that their purple head had been blown apart. But Shadow had fought this boss many times before, so he knew these hotheads would only unleash indiscriminate attacks on the surroundings. Shadow had to defend himself from beams of fire and elemental attacks. Thanks to his high agility, he managed to dodge them, and once again began using the Shadow Blade skill to deal heavy damage to the 3 heads, targeting the red head first. But as the blue head interfered, the water elemental head was destroyed as well. The Shadow Bone Blade exploded in the process, and the damage was so lethal that the other heads couldn't withstand it, suffering heavy damage until they exploded on their own. As Shadow knew about the disco lights of the Headless Witches, a system notification suddenly popped up, announcing that Shadow had killed the mutated witch named Stana and gained 50,000 experience points. Shadow had already been certain of the notification even before it appeared, judging from the deafening boom that echoed throughout the library-like area of the Evil Academy. Finally, Shadow obtained the key to the Evil Spirit Academy hideout, which was a platinum-level hideout. Since his level was high enough, the system informed him that he could now advance his profession. Shadow agreed and started the advancement immediately. The boy's Shadow class advanced from the 1st tier to the 2nd tier, and his class attribute bonus for strength increased from 9 to 27, along with significant increases to constitution, agility, and spirit. Now the boy stood at level 15 with a tradable lifespan of 566.2 years, strength of 147, constitution of 102, agility of 316, spirit of 131, and health points of 2608. His physical attack power reached 535, his cooldown speed was 85, and his damage resistance stood at 77. He also had a non-tradable lifespan of 4510 years and 233 days, along with defense points of 330. This included 24.8% physical damage reduction, element resistance of 458, and 31.4% lightning damage reduction, along with multiple other elemental bonuses he had gained from defeating the witch Stana. Now Shadow was ready to upgrade his skills. As his body glowed with a gleaming aura, another system notification appeared, telling him that his new job passive would ensure he no longer exited stealth mode. Even if an attack broke stealth, his invisibility would remain effective when he attacked. This was a massive boost to Shadow's power. He realized that his attributes had not only doubled but tripled, and now no attacks could cancel his stealth effect unless he disabled it himself. Shadow had truly reached a qualitative transformation and knew that no one could defeat him if he did not allow it. Looking at the key in his hand, he realized the value of the treasure he now possessed. The scene shifts back to a few minutes earlier at the outskirts of the Evil Spirit Academy. Shane was once again running away, shouting at someone about how he dared to come back. As the view panned over, it revealed the same group of 3 men who previously wanted to play with the girl. This time, they decided to call for reinforcements from the Shura Hall Guild so that everyone could join in tormenting the girl. As the blonde man wondered how long the girl could last, the giant roared that he would not go easy on her this time. The man then used an earth smash skill so powerful that the ground trembled violently. But the girl refused to admit defeat, immediately activating her sacred talisman skill and preparing for a final attack. Just then, a flashbang appeared before her, blinding her instantly while also damaging her with its explosive force. Having resorted to cheating, the bullies made no remark as they swiftly trapped her, mocking that they needed to properly educate her. Yet the girl was determined not to die at their hands. She pulled something from her inventory, attempting to drink it, but the blonde man snatched it from her, breaking her hand in the process. Reading the description, he saw it was poison. He realized that if she used it, she would lose half her lifespan but would resurrect at the designated point. This revealed to the group that the girl was not afraid of dying if it meant preserving her honor, which only made the disgusting bullies desire her more. As the man stepped closer to her, a system notification suddenly appeared before the girl. She read that the Platinum-level Sanctuary Evil Spirit Academy was now affiliated with the Guild Shadow. With the barrier activated, all non-guild members were considered intruders, triggering the Sanctuary's cleansing protocol. Before the bullies could react, they were electrocuted from all sides, killed instantly, and their dropped lifespan scattered across the ground. The system informed the girl that the cleaning was complete. She was left utterly shocked, unable to believe that the Evil Spirit Academy was actually a sanctuary, and now it belonged to Shadow's guild. Realizing that in just a few minutes Shadow had slain the Guardian and obtained the key, she stood frozen, still in disbelief, while Shadow wasted no time moving forward.